In those statements we just heard, ladies and gentlemen, there were, of course, some very big hopes for the future. Yet for many of us, if we try to think about the world in 10 years, much less 20 years or 30 years, it's a black box. We project, we worry, but often we have very little to go on when we think about the future beyond extrapolations from what we've known in the past. But that is not the case for our keynote speaker. He is a self-confessed IT nerd with a master's in futurology and extensive experience shaping the foresight sector as a consultant to major industry players, including some of the companies we've just seen up here on stage right now. He says that particularly in turbulent times like the present, we need to follow the science as we set a new course for the future. So what does his research tell us about the future prospects for AM markets? Here to answer that question is Kai Gondlach. Please give him a very warm welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for introducing me. Ladies and gentlemen, and everybody in between, you are going to witness a world premiere of a trend report we did. I'm very happy to walk you through some of the aspects we discovered, we analyzed and observed in the fields of metal AM. In the future, yeah, in 2030, obviously. So, who are we? Maybe just one slide commercial. My name is Kai Gondlach, and I am a trained, studied futures researcher. And so what we do is, I founded a research institute, it's called PROFORE. And what we do actually is we are a decentral institute, and we do futures research and agility and strategic consulting. So if you like, visit us online. But you don't have to, that's fine. So what we did actually was, Earlycon asked us, could you please help us just to shed a little bit more light on the pathway to the year 2030. And of course, we are social scientists, and we are interdisciplinary trained researchers and consultants. So we are not engineers. And that's very important for this whole report. Because what we did actually was give you the outside view on additive, on a metal AM. And what came out after roughly 2 months investigating was a report which is actually just right now being put online. We just finished it yesterday, which is perfect, just in time. I've heard that term a lot of times here. So, what we did is, or what I want to do with you right now is we do have around 20 minutes for the input, and afterwards we have some minutes left, hopefully, to address your questions, and hopefully I'll gonna be able to answer them accordingly. So, this is my agenda, roughly speaking. I'll talk a little bit about the report, how it got into place. Then we'll have the big picture, which is a very, very important aspect of every futuristic report, obviously, because we want to get you into the future mentally. And then we have 3 trend areas. I abbreviated the names of those trend areas here, just for the sake of brevity. In the report, you find a little bit more details, obviously, about them. So the first is called Global Threats Equal AM Opportunities, ? Then we have Regions and Industries Maturity. And the third one is Acceleration of Everything. And obviously, I can't address all the points we have in the report, but I will try my best to give you a little feeling what the report is all about. So, I do have a QR code, which leads you directly to the AMTC.community homepage /downloads. Right now, I don't know the current state actually, right now you won't find the report there, but please do save this website. because you'll find everything here about the conference and, of course, also the report. And the trend report currently counts around 30 pages, I think, with a lot of illustrations and diagrams, so it's not only text. But if you feel like that, please take the time in the next break and download this report, and feel free to get in touch whenever you like with our team or with Earlycon, or yeah, probably that's it with us. So, the report. Basically, of course, the first page is the cover. After that, we have an executive summary. That's probably the page most of you will read, and the basic findings will be there. But I want to explain a little bit more about the futures research part, because I know that studying futures research is not doable everywhere. So when I did it back in 2011 or so, it was very new, and still today I have to explain a little bit, because futurology sometimes sounds like crystal balls, right? So we guess and we project and we give you the lottery numbers. Of course, that's not what we do. We use interdisciplinary methods of social, of technological, of economic research to give you a better foundation for decisions. Obviously, we do that with corporates, we do that with SMEs, we do that with politics, and so on. And basically what we do sometimes, especially for trend reports like this, we look at the very big trends, and I like to refer to them as gigatrends, because that's like the shapes we can observe basically over centuries or even thousands of years. For example, climate change. Climate change is not a megatrend, it's a gigatrend. Then we have megatrends, we have signals and all that stuff, and we find then signals, which is use cases. And we talk to experts, because we're the ones who observe things, and then we ask experts. For example, what do you think? When will the speed of powder bed fusion become at least 100 times faster? One example. We ask that a panel of experts, and then we get back to them again. And one of the quotes one of our experts gave us is this, and I think that's, for the executive summary, very important. It's Professor Christian Seidel from the University of Applied Science here in Munich, and also the Fraunhofer IGCV. And he said every industry is likely to scale. And here we're talking, of course, about the applications of industry, the industries you are probably already working in, but also what he meant by that was every industry that can make use of metal AM. And that's probably a very good quote to open up the rest. So on page number 3, we have this illustration, because this is basically, I think, the most important outcome of the whole investigation. You will find the most important industries you are working in, like aviation, like space, like defense, like automotive. But these bubbles, actually, they shall underline, basically, that also other industries that are not so much on the radar yet for many AM corporations will grow substantially. We can't really say how much, but for example, the cooling industry is one of which very few people mentioned to us, but it's something that's going to grow extremely in the next years or even decades. And also like disaster prevention. AM, or especially metal AM, is perfectly suited to support disaster prevention systems, and also like after catastrophes have happened, especially natural hazards. But also like mobility and infrastructure, we're talking here about like the rise of public transport, of course also like more bicycles. I know that's not the biggest market for you, but also the infrastructure. We talked to certain experts in the field of semiconductor industry, but also like the EV infrastructure systems, and they said, okay, well, we can at least imagine use cases and business cases for the infrastructure system. And also construction is probably becoming more intense and interesting due to the fact that we have like urbanization trends and also individualization trends, at least in the global north. But after this slide, basically the most important parts have happened, so congratulations. But we want to go into the big picture also. Because what we need to do always when we look into the futures, and I've heard some of those aspects already being discussed here today, let's look at things like climate crisis. Most of us know that this is a current thing and a current crisis, and most of us also know that it's not going to be better just by cutting some of the carbon emissions. Some research, and we're not talking about like a few, we were talking about like a growing amount of researchers, think that the amount of weather extremes, like we experienced like in the past few months and years, might sevenfold annually until 2030. We're not talking only about droughts and floodings, we're also talking about the rising sea levels, which makes it a little bit harder to plan cities, especially in coasts. Linked to this, we will definitely, it's probably like between 80 and 90% chance we will have another pandemic at the scale of COVID-19 in this decade. And please don't bug me if it's going to be like 2031. We will experience this, and there's probably no way to like avoid it. So it's your job like to prepare for it and to have like the plan for the next disruption of your supply chain at hand when it happens. Also linked to this, again, we will most likely see a financial market disruption at the end of this decade, maybe also like around 2030. This is also part of a probably negative big picture. This will again lead to more protesting for more social or economic or ecological justice on the streets. But we are here in this room to discuss the solutions to like turn around the problems. And we've seen a lot of like growing in green tech, and we've seen a lot of solutions that for me increased like the bids for an optimistic view into the future. And last but not least, yes, digitization will keep on going, and we will have around 150 to 200 billion connected devices in 2030, which is like tenfold from now, almost. And we will probably move more and more in the metaverse, which is important like for your employees and the HR sector. Let's dive into the trend areas. We have 3 of them. But first, what is a trend area? A trend area is something we spotted and we would like to actually discuss with you to like suggest where most of the important change is going to take place. And also where the most opportunities can happen, but obviously also where threats happen. So the first subchapter of the first trend area is called climate change and sustainability. And I won't, so you don't need to worry, I won't go through all the bullet points here. I just want to talk about like what we on the surface found. So the first thing is, of course, we observe all those threats and global developments I just mentioned in the big picture. And for many, if not the most, industries worldwide, they essentially pose as a threat. But as it's just been discussed earlier, just before I stepped on the stage, we all know that AM can provide the solution for some of those problems. Again, one quote from Professor Christian Seil, he said to us, in the long term, we expect the market to increase tenfold. And what he's meant by long term here is also like on the way to 2030, plus minus a little bit. But we need to recognize, and I'm very, very glad to have seen so much willingness to openness and to cooperation and partnerships here. This won't happen just overnight or just by coincidence, of course. But there needs to be, on the one hand, more cooperation between you and between research, but also a very, very much stronger engagement in the standardization processes. That's what, for example, Professor Seidel told us. That's a very, very bold claim, I know, but it's very important to give more resources into the standardization process so you can continue afterwards, obviously. The other thing from the threats chapter is called Demographics and Silver Societies. So in many parts of the global north, so like industrialized countries, the demographic change currently already led to heavily aged societies. And don't get me wrong, I don't have problems or issues with elderly people, I like them in average. But countries like Japan or Germany already peaked the number of people over 65 years, and we all know what happens then. Those people leave the labor markets, and that's good for them, but it's bad for the societies and the economies. And the number of the amount of the global population which is 65 years or older grows from 8% globally to 12% in the year 2030. We know that. So unless the next pandemic is going to be more terrific, this number will be there. And this will be one more threat to economies, to markets, and also, of course, to your HR policy. However, the general trend towards better healthcare systems in many regions, and most regions, to be honest with you, also brings a lot of opportunities for the companies in this room. As Chaw Sing Ho from NAMEC Singapore said, humans are getting older and expected to stay healthier longer. The personalization of medical devices will become a bold trend for healthcare and biomedicals. And we also observed in our research that there is an increasing openness inside the healthcare system towards solutions like that, including robotics, but also printed devices and even organs, but that's another part. So that's enough for Trend Area 1. If you want to read more, download this report. Trend Area 2 is called Industries and Regions Maturity, and the subchapter I chose to present to you here is like this, steady evolution leads to disruption. And I'm pretty sure that most of you are familiar with the standard innovation curves, so how from early adopting to security and so on this goes. And I think some of the companies in this room have been waiting for this moment of the break-even for some decades even. So the break-even when AM enters all industries. And we're pretty convinced, not absolutely convinced, but we're pretty convinced that this decade will be the decade of the break-even. Meaning that maybe not all, but a majority of small and medium-sized enterprises in most countries are likely to adapt solutions from AM, especially metal AM. Especially in Germany maybe, and Central Europe, where the metal industry is very bold, but also in other countries. We'll come to that later. Another thing is, you can see it here, the multi-material AM is a bold trend. I think most of you are familiar with it, and we've dig deep into different solutions and papers and patents and all that stuff. So if you want to learn more about that, read the sources chapter. But also, there's another claim. We have found that on the one hand, we see the demand rising for larger parts. So talking about houses, buildings, bridges, infrastructure. So this demand is going upwards, especially in emerging markets. And on the other hand, the AM sphere, especially our metal AM, entered the B2C business because it's getting more affordable and quicker to print. So one quote, one more, it says also multi-material applications hold high potential for innovations in various industries. I know for some of you this might not sound so new, but it is a big thing. So, and then the Global South is emerging, already mentioned that one. We have one quote from Mohsen Saifi from ASTM International. He said, AM is, on the one hand, growing globally. However, the level of adoption across different countries vary. While some of them are already in the tipping point of AM industrialization, few of them are emerging, and it's interesting to find out who, and the rest are still in the process of developing a strategy for AM adoption. Okay, I need to hurry a little bit. So the third and last trend area is the acceleration of everything. Obviously, we as future scientists, we deal a lot with digitization, but also with analogization, the counter trends. It's always very important to have counter trends on the radar. And the one thing is, and it's also on the first view, not so totally new, the industry is not actually moving towards the Industry 4.0, but rather it's moving to Industry 5.0 already. I think some steps have been leapfrogged here in the development, also in the strategical development. And that's why we are convinced that the green tech sector is going to boom. That's, again, linked to what I said in the big picture, the disruption of financial markets. But also, what it means for many, many, especially big corporates, you need to rethink the business model, how you earn money with your customers, and who those customers can be, and how they potentially could contribute to your design process, and if you want that, and so on. So it's very, very important to get from 0 to 1 as soon as possible, how Peter Thiel put it once. And we also have one quote from Professor Michael Süß. He said, "Many are afraid of losing their jobs in the old industries, but the worker will not be replaced, but further developed. This means a huge opportunity for the education market on the one hand. On the other hand, AM could also be exciting for or retirees because there is less physical work involved." I think that's a very, very important outlook to labor markets in the future, but we can't go into detail too much here because we also have trends like degrowth and deceleration. On the other hand, I just want to mention them here, so I mentioned them, and if you like, read deeper in the report. But closing quote from Cho Sing-ho again is, "Manufacturing is today too centralized, and the trend towards circular value chains will accelerate the demand for AM and more microfactories worldwide." So I think this quote pretty much summarizes the biggest opportunities for the AM industry, the metal AM industry. But before we come to the Q&A part, I want to prepare you for some other things. Because sometimes futures research also is connected to the Cassandra story of ancient Greece. She always warned decision makers, but no one believed her. And that's why I always show wild cards, because wild cards are very unlikely, but on the other hand, if they happen, they are extremely powerful, like a pandemic or like a war, some of which we warned. So this is just the top 3 of 6 wild cards we also included in the report. The first one is the other pandemic, I mentioned it before, is very likely to occur. The second one is, and I'm pretty convinced that it's going to happen, that at least one of the 9 global tipping points of climate change is going to be disrupted before 2030. It's linked to the rising temperatures. And the third one is a very unlikely but also potentially extreme disruptive scenario, a civil war in the US. And yeah, I'll leave you with this alone to again invite you to download the copy as soon as it's online. And for now, I want to thank you for listening, and I hope we have some minutes left for your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Kai Gondlach.
Thank you.
And ladies and gentlemen, that report will be uploaded essentially right now as we speak. We wanted to give Kai a chance to present the key findings here live before it goes online, but you can check the website after this session and you will find the report and its findings. And let me ask now, who has a question for us? We have a microphone in the room, And we can also take questions that are sent to us via email. You see Kai Gondlach's email address. No, you don't see it yet, but I see it on my screen. Maybe we can put it up here. But we want questions now from the room via our website. So please, if you haven't done so already, do go to the barcode and then you can send us your question. But we can also take them the old school way with a microphone. So who would like to pose a question? Do we need one icebreaker to get it moving? We saw the ice falling down into the water on Kai's slide. Surely we don't need a bigger icebreaker than that, but I'll go ahead then. Kai, of the various findings that you've just outlined for us when it comes to AM and its potential, was there something there that was especially surprising to you, that struck you?
Well, to be honest, a lot of the things I find very surprising. The one pretty bold claim was the acceleration of the printing process, or the PBF process, until 2025 of around 100 times. So it's going to 100-fold the speed of production in PBF, and the source of this was Seurat, and I think they're here as well. And as I said, I'm not an engineer, I can't really assess, but we discussed it in the team, and it's inside the report, so this was really striking. And the other thing maybe was the cooling industry, because I think it's not really on the radar of any company inside the metal AM sphere, correct me if I'm wrong, and it's going to grow really, really hard. We also included it in the report, and that's why I think the cooling industry is maybe the most interesting finding for some.
Thank you very much. And yes, I know you're not an engineer, but you certainly are a futurologist with an eye on the trends. So what would be your key recommendation to this community assembled here when it comes to accelerating industrial adoption?
Think holistically. I mean, most of you already do, but I've noticed also in the past few weeks, but also like since yesterday, that there are still a lot of obstacles in collaborating between industries, between regions, between sections, standardization or economy and politics and so on. But the speeds are, of course, different in those systems, and as we always come from the outside, we try to strengthen this skill to think outside of the box, and you can learn that as well. I mean, every company should have a foresight team, I think, to be better prepared for strategic disruptions.
And indeed, all the disruptions you talked about ultimately are interlinked in many ways, so
Definitely.
that think holistically certainly applies to that. Who has a question here in the room? Here I have one in the second row, where the microphone has
disappeared.
Well,
I can hear you probably.
I talk very loud, maybe everybody.
I'll repeat it for everyone. Go ahead.
You talk about centralization. There was a site on one of your decks that manufacturing is too centralized. At the same time, you talk about regionalization. We see some blocks appearing. Do you see that in your study? And if so, what would be these blocks, large economic blocks that are growing and creating dominance over the current system, which is more central one?
So the question was about centralization as opposed to regionalization. Regionalization, of course, is one of the trends that Kai mentioned in conjunction with supply chain disruptions and re-globalization. Basically, Kai, balance between centralization and regionalization.
It depends on. Every researcher needs to say that as the first sentence. Obviously, the cards are being reshuffled right now. The cards of global markets, and especially for a pretty new technology going into these markets. That's why I think the obligation of companies in this room is more to shape where exactly the centralization or decentralization is taking part. But what we observed in the research is, I think I noted it in a sentence before, that especially in emerging countries, the decentralization of services, of printers, of powders and stuff is going to be like a bigger thing, and the centralized things is going to be in the connected markets like Europe, like the US, like East Asia, like the global North countries. So speaking of which, we also, of course, have a lot of startups. We have linked all of them in the report from different parts of the world. And I think that the ecosystems differ so greatly that we can't really have one bold claim to this question. It's going to be like both, also in 10 years.
Thank you. Who else in the room has a question for us? Michael, please.
If we see all the crises which have happened since Lehman and so on growing, there could be the impression that the Western societies are not capable enough to manage crises. Mm-hmm. That's the perception. On the other hand, if you take reality, who has invented the vaccinations? Who has coped with the crisis over a period in a much better way, like, for example, an autocrat system like China? Mm-hmm. And how you view that from a future perspective, what can we do on the Western side to say we are still a role model? Mm-hmm. We are doing better. We are teaming up against an aggressor in Ukraine. We are coping better, even if the perception was we're not doing it good, but we have done it much better than any other society in the world who has one leader, like Xi in China or Modi in India. They haven't done it that proper.
Absolutely.
So what's going wrong here, and how we can shape that on the future side, because AM is another part of that. It's future technology. We are tech societies, but we are not focusing it anymore. So what can we do better here?
Well, should I be visionary and a little bit of wishful thinking? I would hope that we should be able to ban at least a little bit of the social networks. Because I think a lot of things that happen in our perception of our own resilience, essentially, is so wrong. And yeah, as you just said, and what you said earlier in the opening welcome words, really opened my heart. Because actually, we're doing a pretty good job, but we're so self-inconfident sometimes. Speaking of the progress, like the technological progress, the collaborations that are forming right here before our eyes, it's amazing. And also the societal cohesion actually is better than perceived. So what I think is looking back from the future, we should have done more to openly talk about achievements rather than when we missed a goal or something. It's always important to have goals, of course, and you will never reach them fully, but it's also important to come together and say, or be thankful and grateful for the things we have achieved, and then go further. I think that's a very soft answer, but maybe it answers your question.
Thank you, absolutely. And in fact, it is certainly a mega trend for some years now, the monetization of the internet, and that monetization also includes bad actors seeking to monetize social divisions. So you have it there, exactly.
And we're going to have the metaverse.
Thank you so much, Kai Gondlach, for being with us today. Let's give him a very, very warm round of applause, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you.